Have you ever wished you had a superpower? The ability to know what someone is really thinking? Well, today, we're diving into a skill that gets you pretty darn close, the ability to accurately read people. And we're not talking about those pop psychology myths you see online. We're going to break down the actual, professional techniques of behavioral analysis to understand what's truly being communicated. Let's get into it. So let's start with the big question, the one everyone always asks. Can you spot a lie? Can you really learn to be a human lie detector? It's a fascinating idea for sure, but as we're about to see, it's also the single biggest misconception in this entire field. Here's the truth that every professional analyst knows. There is no single behavior that means that's a lie, not one. I mean, think about it. Even a polygraph machine, the famous lie detector, doesn't actually detect lies. All it does is measure physiological stress responses. Changes in heart rate, breathing, sweat. And that stress response, that's the key. That's where we need to put our focus. So right away, our goal completely shifts. We're not trying to be lie detectors anymore. We're becoming discomfort detectors. And honestly, this is a way more powerful and accurate skill. It helps you see what's really happening under the surface, not just maybe deception, but also things like disagreement, anxiety, or uncertainty. It gives you a much, much richer picture of what's going on. This brings us to a really important concept, deception indicators. Now, that name is a little misleading because they're really indicators of stress or discomfort. Think of them like little red flags in a conversation. They are not proof that someone is lying, but they are crucial signals that tell you, hey, pay attention, something important just happened. It might be time to ask another question. Now, before we get into any of the fun stuff, specific gestures or phrases, we have to install the operating system. These are the foundational rules. Seriously, without these, you are almost guaranteed to misinterpret what you see. They are absolutely critical for getting this right. Okay, so here are the 4 rules that everything else is built on. First, you have to establish a baseline. How does this person normally act when they're totally relaxed? Second, look for clusters. And I mean it. Never, ever, ever rely on just one gesture. Third, watch the 5-second window. Any meaningful reactions are almost always going to happen within 5 seconds of a trigger, like a tough question. And finally, context is key. Are their arms crossed because they're defensive, or is it just, cold in the room? You have to know what's going on. This quote just nails that cluster rule. Think of it like this. Remember high school chemistry? An oxygen atom all by itself is just a gas. But you combine it with 2 hydrogen atoms, now you've got water, something totally different. Well, behaviors are the exact same way. One single gesture means very little, but when you start combining multiple data points, a clear picture starts to form. All right, with our rules in place, let's dive into our first set of indicators, nonverbal cues. This is what most people call body language. And these are so incredibly revealing because a lot of the time, they're coming from our subconscious. They're way harder to control or fake than the words we choose to say. This is one of the most reliable indicators you will ever see. It's when someone's words and their body are telling 2 different stories. So imagine someone says, "Oh yeah, I'm totally confident in my decision," but as they say it, they give this tiny little one-sided shoulder shrug. That's it. Their body just contradicted their words. That little unconscious movement is revealing a hidden uncertainty they're not talking about. Now, here's an indicator that is almost impossible to consciously control: how fast you blink. In a normal, chill conversation, a person might blink somewhere around 10 to 20 times a minute. But put them under stress, ask a question they don't want to answer, and that rate can unconsciously triple, sometimes jumping to over 60 blinks a minute. It's such a dramatic and reliable sign that their stress levels just spiked. Let's run through a few more really high-value nonverbal cues. Lip compression. That's when someone squeezes their lips together. Often means they're holding back a negative thought. Then there's distancing, leaning away, or even putting their coffee cup between you and them. It's an unconscious attempt to create space. Hushing gestures, like touching the mouth, that can be a subconscious reflex to literally stop the words from coming out. And that hard swallow, a big gulp right before they answer a question, that can be a direct physical reaction to a spike of anxiety. Okay, so what about fake expressions, like a fake smile? Real, genuine emotions are usually symmetrical on your face, and they fade away naturally. A fake expression, on the other hand, has 2 major giveaways. First, it's often lopsided, stronger on one side of the face. And second,
It doesn't fade, it just drops. It vanishes in an instant. That sudden stop is a huge clue that the expression was being held there on purpose. Okay, let's switch gears. We've talked about the body, but now let's talk about the words themselves. Because the specific language people choose, the grammar they use, even how they structure their sentences, all of it can be just as revealing as their body language. And to talk about verbal cues, we have to look at probably the most famous example in modern history. I mean, this single sentence is such a perfect masterclass in verbal indicators that it's still used as a case study for behavioral analysts today. It's just packed with clues. Let's just break this down. First, you've got the non-contraction, saying did not instead of the more natural didn't. That formality is often used to try and add fake weight to a denial. Second, there's distancing language. Sexual relations is a cold, clinical term that creates emotional distance from the act. And third, pronoun avoidance. Saying that woman instead of her name creates psychological distance from the person. Every single one of those choices is a verbal tactic.
You hear these all the time, especially from politicians and in business meetings. They're called exclusion qualifiers, and they are basically verbal loopholes. When someone says, "to the best of my knowledge," they're not technically lying, but they're building themselves an escape hatch. It lets them sound truthful without actually committing to the truth.
You know, a truthful person, when accused of something, will usually just deny it. It's simple, it's direct, but someone who's being deceptive often avoids that direct denial. Instead, they might use a non-answer and just talk about something else. Or they'll give you a resume statement where they list all the reasons they're a good person instead of just answering the question. And then there's the convincing statement, something like, honestly, I would never do that, which is trying to persuade you, not just inform you. So we've looked at what the body tells us, and we've looked at what words tell us. But the real power, the real art and science of all this, isn't about spotting one little thing. It's about combining them into meaningful clusters.
And I want to be absolutely crystal clear on this. What does one single cue mean on its own? A throat clear? A fast blink? A weird phrase? It means almost nothing. Seriously, if you make a judgment based on one single indicator, you will be wrong more often than you are right.
But what's the value of a cluster of cues? Seeing 2, 3, or more of these things happen all at once? That is everything. When you see someone's words not matching their body, plus their blink rate spikes, plus they use a convincing statement, all within 5 seconds of your question, well, now your confidence that you've spotted significant stress should go through the roof.
So, if you only take one single thing away from this whole explainer, please make it this. This is the entire framework right here in one sentence. Look for a cluster of indicators that show a major deviation from a person's baseline and interpret it all within the proper context of the situation. That right there, that's the formula.
Look, the goal here isn't to make you suspicious or cynical. It's actually the opposite. It's to make you a more observant and maybe even a more empathetic observer of people. It's about understanding the whole story that's being told, not just the one coming from their mouth. So now that you have the framework, the only question left is, what are you going to start noticing?